Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where ancient beliefs, forgotten rituals, and haunted truths come alive in the dark. Tonight, we take you deep into the misty mountains of northern Vietnam, where the dead are fed but never seen. They call it the Silent Feast, a forbidden table hidden in the forest, where ancestral spirits dine in complete silence. But if you ever sit down and speak a single word, something else might answer in your place. This is not a myth. This is a warning. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because tonight the feast begins.
The bus ride had lasted 7 hours, but Nam barely noticed the time. He had kept his eyes on the mist-shrouded mountains outside the window, watching as modern highways gave way to winding dirt roads and scattered wooden houses. The air grew colder the higher they climbed. The trees grew denser, the silence deeper. By the time the vehicle stopped at the edge of the village, Nam felt like he had crossed into another century. Tả Phìn wasn't on any tourist map. It lay curled against the foot of a forest too old to be named, where clouds hung low and moss grew thick on stone walls. No neon lights, no convenience stores, just the quiet hum of cicadas, the soft patter of barefoot steps, and the rustle of trees whispering secrets only the dead could hear. Nam stepped off the bus with a single duffel bag and his camera slung over his shoulder. He hadn't been back here in over 20 years, not since his mother died in the city and his grandmother refused to leave the mountains. As a child, he remembered fearing this place, not because of monsters, but because of the silence. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like something watching from behind the trees. Now, as a researcher of cultural folklore, that silence called to him. He had returned not for comfort, but for answers. A weathered woman in indigo robes waited at the edge of the dirt road. Her back was bent like a willow tree, and her face was a map of every season this land had seen. It took Nam a moment to recognize her. "Bah," he whispered, "grandmother." Her eyes, clouded with time, flicked up to meet his. "You came back," she said, in a voice that sounded like dry leaves. "I knew the spirits would call you." Nam smiled, though unease crawled beneath his skin. "I came for my research. I'm documenting ancestral rites for the university." Her grandmother didn't return the smile. She turned and began walking toward the village without another word. As they walked, Nam noticed that every house had a small altar just outside the front door. Some had bowls of rice, others had burnt incense still smoking faintly. But all of them, every single one, had a single chopstick stuck vertically into the rice. He paused in front of one. "Why only one chopstick?" he asked. Her grandmother's voice came from behind him, low and hard. "Don't touch it." "I wasn't going to." "It's not for you." Her words cut through the damp air like a blade. Nam nodded and followed in silence. The house she led him to was small but sturdy, built of red clay bricks and dark wooden beams. It smelled of mildew, old paper, and something vaguely metallic. She prepared tea with slow, practiced movements, her hands trembling slightly. They sat across from each other in silence until she finally spoke. "They've already started eating," she said without looking up. Nam frowned. "Who?" "The ones you can't see." A log cracked in the fire pit. The sound made Nam flinch.
Her grandmother's gaze was distant now, lost in the flicker of flames. It's Ghost Month, and in Tả Phìn, we feed more than just memories. Nam felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. I heard rumors, he said cautiously, about something called the Silent Feast. Her hand froze mid-air, clutching the edge of her cup. You shouldn't say that name out loud, she whispered. It listens. Nam leaned forward. I need to know, Ba, for my research. What is it? Her grandmother didn't answer. Instead, she got up, shuffled to a wooden cabinet, and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped bundle. She placed it on the table, slowly unrolling it. Inside was a single blackened chopstick. Nam stared at it, confused. Then her grandmother said softly, almost mournfully, People don't disappear in Tả Phìn. They get invited to dinner. Nam couldn't take his eyes off the chopstick. Its surface was dark as coal, with an oily sheen that shimmered under the dim light. It didn't look burned, no cracks, no signs of scorching. It looked soaked in something old, something that had sunk deep into the wood and refused to leave. He reached out without thinking. His grandmother slapped his hand before he could touch it. Never, she said firmly, her voice suddenly sharp. Never hold the chopstick unless it was meant for you. Nam pulled his hand back, startled. What does that mean? His grandmother rewrapped the cloth, as if putting the item back to sleep. It means someone survived. Nam blinked. Survived what? She looked him in the eye for the first time that night. The feast. The words hung in the air like incense smoke, clinging, choking, filling the spaces between reason and dread. He leaned back slowly. So, it's real? The silent feast? She didn't answer right away. She poured more tea, but didn't drink it. There are many kinds of feasts during Ghost Month. Families make offerings for wandering spirits. Rice, meat, sweets, tea. We leave them outside so the hungry ghosts won't enter our homes. She paused. But there is one offering no one speaks of, not in daylight, not even during prayer. Nam waited, heart thudding. The silent feast is not made for our ancestors. It is made for the nameless. Nam furrowed his brow. The nameless? The ones who died forgotten. No graves, no chants, no descendants to remember them. Spirits with no name, no home. She looked out the window as if expecting to see them watching. They are the hungriest. Nam felt his skin crawl. His grandmother went on. Once, a year, during the darkest night of Ghost Month, a table appears in the forest. Not built, not carried there. It just appears, set with steaming dishes no one cooked, fresh fruits, meats, rice and tea. But nothing spoils, no ants, no flies. The food is untouched by time or nature. Nam's throat tightened. And someone sits there? She nodded slowly. Always one, just one, a chosen guest. Chosen by who? She closed her eyes. That's the part we never understood, but it's never the same person twice. Nam was silent for a moment. Do they survive? Sometimes, if they follow the rules. He could barely get the next words out. What rules? Her voice dropped. You must sit alone. You must eat in silence. You must not speak, no whisper, no breath of sound, not even in your mind, because if you speak, she reached out and gently touched his throat. It will take your voice. Then it will take your place. A shiver ran down Nam's spine. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. This sounds like a ghost story told to scare children. Her gaze didn't waver. Ghost stories protect children. They're meant to keep them alive. The fire crackled. Nam shifted uncomfortably. So why keep the chopstick? Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea again. Because one day, a boy from the village went missing during Ghost Month. Everyone thought he had drowned, but days later, this chopstick appeared outside his family's door, stuck in a bowl of cold rice, black, like this. She looked at Nam. He came back 3 days later, mute, starving, eyes white with fear. He wouldn't enter his own house. Nam's voice dropped. What happened to him? She stared into the fire. He stopped speaking. Then he stopped eating. Then he disappeared again. Nam swallowed hard. Suddenly the wind outside picked up and the window shuddered. A chill swept through the room. His grandmother slowly stood and moved to the altar, lighting a single stick of incense. As the smoke rose, she muttered a quiet prayer under her breath, words Nam didn't recognize. He remained seated, thoughts racing. How much of this was real? How much was rural folklore, exaggerated over generations? But then his eyes drifted back to the bundle on the table, and he couldn't shake the thought. That chopstick had waited a long time, and now he was back.
Nam couldn't sleep that night. The wind clawed at the windows like something trying to get in, not violent, just persistent, like a child too polite to knock but too hungry to leave. The old wooden walls groaned and creaked, and the fire in the hearth had long gone out, leaving the room steeped in cold and shadow. He lay on a thin mat under several blankets, the blackened chopstick still haunting his thoughts. Was it just a village tale? He had heard plenty of ghost stories before, some grotesque, some beautiful, most forgotten as soon as the campfire died. But something about this story clung to him like wet cloth. It wasn't just the tale, it was the silence surrounding it, the fear in his grandmother's voice, the way no one in the village spoke of it, even in whispers. There was power in silence, and danger in speech. Nam turned on his side and pulled out his phone. There was no signal, of course, not this deep in the mountains. But he opened his voice recorder anyway and began speaking quietly. Journal entry, Day 1, Tả Phìn Village. Subject, Ancestral Rites During Ghost Month. Possible undocumented local variant involving silent offerings to unnamed spirits. He hesitated. Locals refer to it as the Silent Feast. Details are vague. The story centers around a forest table that appears once a year. Rules are clear. Eat in silence, speak, and you disappear. He paused again, staring into the dark corner of the room. I don't know what I believe yet, but something here feels ancient. Not dead, not gone, just waiting. He tapped to stop the recording, and that's when he heard it. A soft click, not from the phone, from the hallway, like a door unlatching on its own. Nam froze. The house had only one other room, his grandmother's bedroom, and she always locked her door before bed. He sat up slowly, heart thudding. Another sound. Shuffle, scrape,
Shuffle. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. He rose silently, trying not to make the floorboards creak. He crossed the room barefoot, every breath measured, and peeked out into the hallway. Nothing. Just darkness. He flicked on his flashlight. The hallway was empty, but something caught his eye. Faint streaks of dirt across the floor, leading from the back door, inward. And the door? Unlatched, slightly open. Nam swallowed hard and stepped toward it. He pulled the door open fully. Outside, the night was blanketed in fog, dense, unmoving. The trees at the edge of the house looked like tall figures with no faces, standing still in the haze. But at the center of the yard was a bowl of rice and a single, vertical chopstick. This one was red, fresh. He staggered back inside and shut the door. His hands were shaking. He rushed to his grandmother's room. "Ba, Ba, wake up!" But she was already sitting up, fully alert. "I know," she said. Nam stared at her. "You know what? That there's another offering outside? That someone's been here?" She nodded slowly. "They always come before the feast." He blinked. "Who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said something worse. "They're reminding you. You spoke about it. Now it's listening." Nam's chest tightened. "It was just a recording. I didn't mean—" "It doesn't matter what you meant, only that you said it out loud." She stood, barefoot and frail, and lit another stick of incense. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed a mirror beside the altar, facing the door. Nam frowned. "What's the mirror for?" "To reflect what's already here," she whispered. The flame on the incense flickered violently. Nam turned his head to the door again. This time, he felt it, the presence, something standing just beyond the frame, something that couldn't enter unless invited by sound. He didn't speak another word that night. By morning, the fog had not lifted. It clung to the village like a damp blanket, swallowing rooftops and muting all sound. No roosters crowed, no footsteps echoed. Even the dogs were silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Nam stood at the doorway, staring at the bowl of rice still sitting in the yard. The red chopstick gleamed like blood. His grandmother had refused to touch it. "It's not for us," she said simply. "To move it is to accept it." Nam didn't ask what that meant. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Instead, he packed his notebook and camera and walked toward the village center, hoping for answers from someone less cryptic. But the villagers were no more helpful. They nodded politely, avoided his gaze, and stepped away when he asked about the silent feast. A few muttered prayers, others shut their doors entirely. It was as if the very word feast had weight, heavy, cursed, and impossible to carry in public. He was about to give up when he met Lee, or rather, Lee found him. A boy, maybe in his 20s, wearing a threadbare jacket and a blank stare. He appeared at Nam's side near the market stalls, not saying a word, just watching. "Can I help you?" Nam asked. The boy didn't respond. Nam frowned. "You're not from here?" The boy pointed at the small microphone clipped to Nam's jacket, his field recorder. "You know about this?" Nam asked. The boy nodded. Nam hesitated, then pressed a little further. "Do you know about the table, the one in the forest?" The boy's expression changed. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes darkened. He slowly raised his hand and placed 2 fingers over his lips. Silence. Then he turned, gesturing for Nam to follow. They left the village path and entered the forest. Nam hesitated, his instinct screaming caution, but something in the boy's eyes stopped him from turning back. It wasn't madness, it wasn't emptiness, it was fear. Controlled, caged, constant. The deeper they walked, the colder it became. The trees grew taller, leaning over the narrow trail like listening elders. The light dimmed to a gray haze, and birdsong vanished entirely. Then, without warning, Lee stopped. He pointed ahead. Nam followed his gaze. There, half buried in the underbrush, was a table. Old, weathered, carved with strange symbols that had nearly vanished from rot and time. No food, no bowls, just a surface stained with age and something darker along the edges. But the air around it, Nam shivered. It was colder here, not just cool, wrong, like heat had been drained, like the air didn't breathe anymore. He stepped closer, camera raised, but Lee grabbed his arm, hard. Nam turned, startled. The boy stared at him with wide eyes and shook his head violently. Then he opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Nam froze. No sound, not a whisper. Lee's mouth moved again. No voice. Not hoarse, not cracked. Gone. Nam's stomach dropped. You can't speak?" Lee nodded slowly, his face twisted with frustration. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He handed it to Nam. Scrawled in shaky, uneven handwriting were 4 words. "I spoke. Now silence." Nam looked up, shaken. "This happened after you came here?" Lee didn't answer. He didn't have to. Instead, he pointed to the edge of the clearing. There, half buried in the underbrush, was a tiny bundle of red thread tied around a twig. Nam stepped closer. There was something carved in the bark below it, deep, harsh strokes. It looked like a warning, a name, a prayer. And then he saw it. In the soil beneath the tree, a half-buried wooden chopstick, blackened, rotting. Nam stepped back, breath caught in his throat. Lee tugged his sleeve gently. The boy pointed up. The canopy above them was filled with strips of red cloth, hundreds of them, hanging like forgotten prayers. And for a moment, the wind stirred. Not loud, just enough. Enough to make every strip of cloth whisper together with a dry, rasping hiss. Krrr. Nam grabbed Lee's arm. "We need to go." They ran. By the time Nam and Lee reached the edge of the forest, the sun had already begun to set. But the light didn't feel warm. It was as if the forest had drained it, stolen all its color, replacing it with a pale, sickly gray that clung to their skin. Nam's lungs burned, not from the run, but from something heavier than exhaustion. They hadn't spoken a word. Even now, standing in open air again, neither of them dared to speak. Lee turned, gave a single nod, and disappeared down a narrow alley between houses, like a ghost slipping back into hiding. Nam stood there alone, heart racing, mind spinning. He had footage now, photographs, physical evidence of the table in the woods. But more than that, he had fear. Real, bone-deep fear. And for the first time since arriving in Tả Phìn, he began to understand why no one spoke its name. That night, as the villagers lit incense for the dead, Nam sat beside his grandmother's altar in silence. His hands were still trembling when he lit the first stick. The smoke curled into the air in elegant spirals, gray and slow-moving. He watched it dance in the candlelight, hypnotic and strange. Then he saw it. A flicker. in the smoke. A face. Nam blinked and leaned in. It was gone. He rubbed his eyes, laughed nervously to himself. But as the incense burned lower, the face returned. Not human, not animal, something in between. Too many teeth, eyes with no lids, and it was smiling. The smoke rippled again, and the image vanished. He stood up too quickly, knocking over a small offering bowl. His grandmother entered the room without a word, bent slowly to clean it, and looked up at him with deep, tired eyes. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. Nam hesitated. "The smoke." She nodded. "They watch through it. It's how they find who's been speaking." He swallowed. "So, if I light incense, you're inviting them to listen." She picked up the broken ceramic pieces, her hands delicate and practiced. "They don't need doors, just a whisper, just a name." Nam sat back down, heart pounding. "I didn't mean to say anything," he whispered. His grandmother looked at him for a long time. "It doesn't matter what you meant. You brought the words back. Now they know you remember." She placed the broken bowl on the altar anyway, as if the offering still counted. Nam stared at the flickering incense, unwilling to blink. He felt like if he looked away, the thing in the smoke would return, and maybe this time it wouldn't vanish. Then she said something that froze the blood in her veins. "You should be careful tomorrow night." "Why?" "It's the 13th night of Ghost Month." Nam frowned. "What does that mean?" Her voice was almost a whisper now. "That's when the table reappears." The next morning, the fog returned, thicker than before. It rolled in from the mountains before sunrise, spilling over the rooftops like slow-moving smoke, swallowing fences, trees, and eventually the streets themselves. Nam opened the window and reached out. His hand disappeared halfway into the mist. He couldn't see the gate. He couldn't see the road. He couldn't even see the sky. It felt like the village had been removed from the world and placed in a box of cloud and silence. His grandmother had already risen. She was burning more incense than usual, placing offerings at every threshold, doors, windows, even the cracks in the walls, rice, salt, bits of pork fat, and red string. Nam watched her. "What's the red string for?" he asked softly. She didn't answer at first. Then she tied the last piece to the window handle and said, "It's not to keep them out." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it for?" She looked at him. "To let us know when they come in." Later that day, Nam walked the village streets again, hoping to find Lee or someone who would speak. But the streets were nearly empty. Doors were closed, curtains drawn. Incense smoke seeped from windows like breath from sleeping mouths. The only sounds were the faint clicking of wind chimes made from bone and silver. Then he saw the child. A little girl, no older than 6, standing at the edge of the well. Her dress was pale green. Her feet were bare. Her hands were covered in ash. Nam approached cautiously. "Hi," he said. "Are you all right?" She didn't turn to look at him. Instead, She pointed down the well. Nam stepped closer and peered inside. Just water, still and dark. No reflection, no sound. Then the girl spoke. "There's a chair down there," she whispered. "It has your name on it." Nam snapped his head around. "What?" But the girl was already gone. No footsteps, no echo, no sign she'd ever been there. Just the faint scent of something wet and sour lingering in the air. He stood frozen for a moment, then slowly backed away from the well. That night, the fog did not lift, nor did the silence. His grandmother cooked a small meal, plain rice, boiled greens, and pickled egg, but neither of them ate much. The clock ticked, the candles burned low, the incense hissed. Nam stared out the window. He couldn't see past the yard, but he could feel something waiting beyond the curtain of mist. Something old, something that had heard its name whispered after years of silence. Then, just after midnight, it happened. A knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, just firm. Once, then again, twice. A pause, then a soft scrape, like something being placed just outside. Nam stood. His grandmother remained seated, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice was steady, almost detached. "Don't open it." He walked to the door anyway. Every step he took made the house colder. He placed his hand on the knob. He hesitated, then slowly opened it. Fog poured in like breath from a tomb. And on the wooden porch, a small tray, neatly arranged, a bowl of hot rice, a slice of pork, a tiny porcelain cup of tea still steaming, and in the center, a chopstick, black, glossy, standing upright. Nam stepped back, shutting the door, heart pounding in his throat. His grandmother didn't move. "It's not a warning anymore," she said. He turned to her. "It's an invitation." Nam didn't sleep. He sat on the floor beside the altar, eyes locked on the doorway where the tray had been placed just hours before. Though he had shut and bolted the door, the scent of the offering lingered in the air, a strangely sweet aroma, earthy and metallic, like honey stirred into blood. His grandmother hadn't spoken since calling it an invitation. She simply lit more incense and whispered prayers with closed eyes and trembling fingers. The clock struck 3. The fog remained, and in the silence, Nam heard it. The sound of leaves. Not falling, not rustling, turning. Like hundreds of dry leaves flipping themselves over at once, brushing against one another in the dark. It came from the forest. He stood slowly, picked up his flashlight, and reached for his camera. "You're not going alone," his grandmother said suddenly. Nam turned. "I need to see it. I need to understand." She didn't argue. Instead, she handed him a small pouch made of red cloth, tied with string. "Hang this around your neck. Do not take it off." He looked inside. Salt, dried herbs, a sliver of bone, and something black that looked like burned rice. "What is it?" he asked. "A silence pouch," she said. "As long as you wear it, they can't speak through you." "And if I take it off?" Her answer was soft. "Then your voice is no longer your own." Nam stepped into the mist at 3:33 a.m. The cold swallowed him instantly. He could see nothing beyond a few feet ahead, but his feet moved instinctively toward the path, toward the place where the table had once been. The forest greeted him with an unnatural stillness. No insects, no birds, no wind. But the trees moved. Not all at once, not violently, just enough to shift in place, as if turning to face him one by one. He walked deeper. At first he thought he was alone. Then came the breath, cold, shallow, right behind his ear. He spun around, nothing. But when he looked down, the path had changed. The ground beneath his feet was no longer forest soil. It was smooth, flat, stone. Carved stone slick with moss. He shined his light forward, and there it was, the table. Exactly as it had been before, but now set. Bowls of rice, meat, preserved vegetables, a kettle of tea, dishes so fresh they steamed in the night air, chopsticks laid beside every plate except one. One seat was empty. A single black chopstick stood upright in its bowl, waiting. Nam's throat tightened. He raised his camera, hand trembling, and began recording. Through the lens, the table shimmered, rippled as if underwater. Then, movement. From the corners of the frame, figures. He dropped the camera. Naked eyes were worse. Shapes began to materialize around the table, gray, translucent forms, humanoid but wrong. Their faces were smudged shadows, their limbs too long, too thin, but they moved with purpose. They were sitting down. One by one, the seats filled. Each figure bowed its head toward its dish. Then they began to eat. No sound, no chewing, no motion of lips or jaws. The food simply vanished, slowly, like it was being swallowed by time. Nam backed away, but the empty seat remained. Its chopstick stood perfectly still. He stepped closer. Then he heard it, a voice, but not from the table, from inside his head. Low, familiar. It sounded like his grandmother. "Sit," it said sweetly. "Don't speak." Nam gasped, clutching the pouch at his neck. The voice stopped, but then came another, different, deeper, older. "Take it off," it breathed. "Let us in." Nam turned and ran. The trees bent as he passed. The fog clawed at his arms, and from behind he heard dozens of feet rising from the table and following.
Nam didn't remember how he got back. One moment he was running, branches slapping his face, fog choking his lungs, footsteps closing in behind him, and the next he was on the floor of his grandmother's house, curled against the wall, shaking and covered in mud. The door was locked, the candles had burned out, and his grandmother was gone. Only the silence remained, except for one thing. The pouch around his neck had been cut. Not torn, cut with precision. The red string dangled loosely, frayed and lifeless. Nam scrambled to his feet, heart pounding in his throat. On the floor beside him lay his field journal. He hadn't touched it in days. The cover was wet. He opened it, hands trembling. His notes from the past 3 days, gone. Not scribbled out, not ripped, just blank. Pages that once held memories and warnings now stared back at him in perfect, untouched emptiness. He flipped faster. Every mention of the table erased, every sketch, every quote, every map, gone. All that remained was a single page near the center of the notebook, written in handwriting that wasn't his. "You saw us.
Now we see you." Nam slammed the book shut and stumbled backward, breath catching in his chest. Then he noticed something on the altar. A bowl, not incense, not rice, ash. Fine black ash, smoldering faintly. And in the center of the ash, something small and metallic. Nam stepped closer. It was a voice recorder. His voice recorder. He picked it up with trembling fingers and pressed play. For a moment there was only static, then his own voice, a journal entry from earlier that week. Day 1, Tả Phìn village, subject, ancestral rites during Ghost Month. Then came a second voice, not his, not human, mimicking his voice, speaking over him, speaking through him. Day 1, we welcome the offering, we welcome the vessel. He remembers us, he remembers the way. Nam dropped the recorder. It cracked against the floor. The sound echoed far too long, as if the house was suddenly larger than it had ever been. Then the knock came again, 3 soft taps at the door. Knock, knock, knock. He backed away. The knock repeated. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then a whisper from inside the house, close, right behind him. Say something. Nam spun around. No one was there, but the mirror near the altar had fogged over, and written into the condensation in long, uneven strokes were the words, "Speak and eat." His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, pressing his hands over his mouth as if to physically hold the silence inside him. And then, slowly, he felt it. Hands, invisible, cold, pressing lightly on his shoulders, not aggressive, but possessive, as if something was testing the weight of his body, fitting itself into him. He closed his eyes, praying silently, over and over, not words, just intention. But the whisper returned, this time from inside his own head. Words are doors. He curled tighter into himself. Then the front door creaked open, on its own. No knock, no wind, just the yawning entrance of fog and the scent of freshly cooked rice. Nam didn't move. He knelt on the cold floor as the door slowly creaked wider, letting the fog slither inside like a living thing. The scent of rice and pork drifted through the house again, warm, inviting, impossible. It was the same offering he saw at the table, but this time it wasn't on a tray. It was on a plate. On the table. His table. Nam turned his head slowly. There, on the wooden table beside the altar, was a full meal, steaming, untouched. A bowl of rice, a boiled egg, pickled vegetables, a cup of tea. Everything his grandmother used to make when he was a child. But she hadn't cooked tonight. The fire was out. The pot was cold. And yet, the food was hot. A single chopstick stood upright in the rice. Black. His breath shook. Then, creak, the floor behind him bent under a footstep. He spun around. There was no one there. But when he turned back, the chair at the table was no longer empty. Someone was sitting in it. Nam's body locked. He couldn't move. The figure was facing away from him, head bowed over the meal. Long, unkempt black hair. A shirt faded and tattered. Shoulders hunched forward like a person who hadn't been looked at in years. Nam didn't speak, didn't even breathe. The air in the room grew heavier, the shadows longer. Then the figure slowly, very slowly, lifted its head and turned. Nam's mouth opened in silent shock. It was Lee, or something wearing his face. But this Lee was wrong. His skin was too pale, his eyes too wide, his lips too still. When he blinked, it wasn't a blink, it was a shudder, like the closing of a camera lens. "Lee?" Nam whispered. The thing smiled and shook its head. Then it opened its mouth and whispered in Nam's grandmother's voice, "You should not have spoken." Nam stumbled backward. "You saw the table, you heard the breath, you smelled the food. Now you are on the list." Nam screamed, but no sound came out. His throat burned, his mouth opened wide, but nothing emerged, not even air. It was like something had taken the idea of speech and swallowed it whole. The figure stood, its limbs stretched too far, and in its hand, now visible under the table, was a wooden chopstick, black but cracked. Nam turned and fled. Out the door, into the fog. The village no longer looked the same. The houses were there, but wrong, tilted, windows too tall, doors too narrow, like the structures had been remembered from a dream and rebuilt incorrectly. The fog pulsed around him, thickening and thinning in waves. And then he saw them. Figures. In the windows, in the alleys, watching, not moving, not hiding, just waiting. Nam ran. His breath came in silent gasps. He didn't know where he was going. Until he collided with someone. He fell back hard onto the dirt, blinking. The fog cleared just enough to reveal his grandmother. But she was not alone. She was kneeling beside a small altar, weeping softly. In front of her, a photograph, framed in black, faded, of a young man. Nam stepped closer. His heart stopped. It was him, younger, from years ago, taken in a school uniform he hadn't worn since he left for the city. His grandmother's lips trembled as she whispered into the incense, "I'm sorry. I thought I had more time." Nam reached out to touch her shoulder, but his hand went straight through her. She didn't feel it, didn't see him. She was praying for someone already gone. Nam stood frozen, hand still extended through his grandmother's shoulder, unable to comprehend what he had just seen or not seen. She couldn't feel him. She couldn't see him. She was crying over a photograph of him. A version of him that felt distant now, like a name he hadn't heard in years. He pulled his hand back and stumbled away from the altar. The fog parted slightly, as if granting him space to process. "I'm not dead," he thought. "I'm not." But the thought felt weak, uncertain. He tried to speak, to say anything out loud. Nothing. No breath, no vibration, not even the idea of a voice. Nam pressed his fingers to his throat. It wasn't sore, it wasn't blocked. It was empty, like something had scooped out the sound from inside him. Then a whisper, but not in his voice. "You sat too close. You stayed too long." He spun around. No one. But the air was heavier again, and colder. Nam began to run, not toward anything, just away. The village twisted as he moved. Familiar paths led to unfamiliar homes. Landmarks rearranged themselves. Incense smoke hung in the air like strands of web, catching on his arms and neck. Finally, he reached the forest's edge. or what he thought was the edge. But something was different. The trees were older here, taller, their trunks garled like knotted hands reaching from the soil. The roots formed ridges in the earth like broken ribs, and in the center of the clearing, a tree larger than the rest, towering, silent, wrapped in red thread. Nam stepped closer. Its bark was covered in carvings, symbols, names, prayers, some recent, some faded with time, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. But it wasn't the carvings that stopped him. It was the ground. Beneath the tree, the soil was flat, dry, smooth. No grass, no stones, no footprints, and no shadow. Nam blinked. The tree cast no shadow. Despite the soft light from the fog-filtered moon, the area beneath it was blank, untouched by light or dark. It was wrong. Then he saw the altar, small, simple, and on it, a bowl of rice, still steaming. He moved closer, compelled now like something inside him was being pulled forward while the rest of him screamed to run. The bowl had a single chopstick, red, and carved into the side of the wooden altar, the last seat. His breath caught in his throat, or it would have if he could still breathe. Nam turned around, heart pounding in the absence of sound. There were people now, 10, maybe more, standing in the fog just beyond the clearing, all facing the tree, all silent. Some wore funeral robes, others modern clothes. Some had no faces, but one of them was Lee, and next to him, Nam's mother, looking exactly as he remembered her the day she died. She reached out toward him, her mouth moved, but no sound came. She wasn't smiling. She looked afraid. Then every head turned, slowly, toward the base of the tree. Nam followed their gaze and saw it. The chair. Not like the ones at the feast. This one was different, older, taller, its legs rooted into the earth like it had grown from the ground. And on its seat, carved in weathered letters, Nam. The forest held its breath, and Nam realized this wasn't just a feast, it was a ritual, and now he had been named. Nam staggered backward from the tree. The chair with his name on it stood motionless, yet he felt like it was watching him, waiting, like it had always been there, carved into the fate of the forest, waiting for him to finally return to it. He wanted to scream, to run, to cry out, but his voice was still missing. And now, so was the forest. The mist grew impossibly thick, rising in heavy waves like tides around his feet, then his waist. The figures who had been watching him, Lee, his mother, the faceless ones, they were fading, not disappearing, sinking into the ground like ink absorbed into paper. Nam turned, desperate to flee. He didn't care where, anywhere but here. He ran until the trees thinned and the soil turned to gravel. He was back near the village, but the air felt different now. Warmer, still silent, but wrong. The lanterns in front of homes flickered dimly, even though there was no wind. Smoke from incense curled backward, retreating into its sticks like time reversing. Nam stopped in the middle of the path, chest heaving, legs trembling. Then, laughter. Soft, childlike, giggling. He turned. At the edge of the road, near the community well, stood 3 children. 2 girls and a boy, barefoot, smiling, wearing matching white ceremonial shirts. Their hands were dirty. Their mouths were red, but their teeth were clean. Too clean. Too sharp. Nam took a step back. One of the girls pointed at him. Her eyes were pure white. No iris, no pupil, just milky fog swirling under the surface. "You're going to the table," she said. Her voice was too clear for the fog, as if she wasn't speaking here, but inside him. The boy stepped forward, still smiling. "You should be proud. They picked you." Nam shook his head. The second girl twirled in place. "We saw your plate. It has the best food." The boy nodded. "They saved the chair just for you." Nam's breath was rapid, his limbs screaming to run again, but he was frozen. The first girl tilted her head, curious. "Why are you scared?" Then all 3 of them said it together in one voice. "You already ate." Nam stumbled back. "No," he mouthed. "No, I didn't." But they were already walking toward him. One of them whispered, "You don't remember." The other smiled wider. "That's how they feed." Nam turned and ran again, but the laughter followed him, skipping, echoing, bouncing off walls and trees and sky. When he reached his grandmother's house, the door was open. Not forced, not broken, just open. Inside, the lights were out. The incense had burned to ash, and the silence was no longer peaceful. It was hungry. He called out, tried to. No voice came. He stumbled into the main room. On the floor, beneath the altar, lay a new bowl, fresh, still steaming. Inside it, his photograph, burned around the edges, curled, blackened, and floating on the surface of the broth, a single chopstick. Red, not upright, but sinking. Nam dropped to his knees. His hands touched the floor. It was cold. Then he saw the footprints, small, barefoot, child-sized. They circled him once, then vanished. And from the darkest corner of the room, something whispered, not in his grandmother's voice, not in his own, but in Lee's. And it said, "You never left the table."
Nam didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke up at the table. Not the altar table, not the one in his grandmother's house, the feast table, the one in the forest. Steam curled from silver dishes that hadn't been there a moment ago. The air was thick with scent, sweet meat, old incense, and something floral that reminded him of funerals. His hands were resting on the wood. His body sat perfectly straight. He tried to move. He couldn't. Only his eyes.
He looked around. The table was full now. To his left, a woman in a red wedding gown, face covered with a sheer veil soaked in black mold. Her hands held chopsticks delicately, but she was not eating. Her chest didn't rise. To his right, a young boy with a broken neck tilted too far sideways. His mouth was sewn shut with red string, but his head turned with an unnatural crack every time the wind shifted. Across from him, a man with no eyes, just dark hollows where sockets should be, filled with writhing black worms. But the man smiled like he could still see. All of them were smiling, all of them still, and all of them were waiting. Nam tried to scream. Nothing. He tried to stand. His legs wouldn't move. But something was in front of him. A bowl. Steam rising, rice perfectly shaped, and resting across the top, a pair of black chopsticks, crossed. Nam stared at them. He didn't remember placing them, but somehow they were his. The man across the table finally spoke. Not with lips, not with breath, but with intention. "We are full," he said without sound. Nam felt the words vibrate inside his chest. Then why am I still here? Nam thought, desperate. Why me? The answer came not from the man, but from the table. Its wood groaned softly. Then it pulsed, like something alive. And in his mind, a voice older than language whispered, "Because you tasted us first." Suddenly, Nam could move. He bolted upright, knocking over the chair, shoving the table aside. The forest snapped back into color, gray and black and moon-pale white. The table vanished behind him as he ran. The fog was thicker now, but familiar. He reached the edge of the trees. The village reappeared through the mist. He stumbled into the first clearing, collapsed to the dirt path, gasping for breath, though he wasn't sure he needed to breathe anymore. The lights in the houses were on. Everything looked normal. Almost. He rose slowly and approached the nearest window. Inside, a family was eating dinner, peacefully. A mother, a father, 2 children. But none of them had faces, just smooth skin where their eyes, mouth, and nose should be. And yet they chewed and laughed. Nam recoiled, heart thundering. He ran to another house. Inside, a man sitting alone, a candle burning, a meal untouched. Then the man turned his head slowly toward the window, toward Nam. Nam stepped back. The man had his face, not similar, his exact face, but pale, hollow, mouth sewn shut with red thread. And the man raised a hand, gently pointing to the bowl beside him. Inside it, a photo of Nam asleep. Nam fell backward onto the road. When he looked up, the children were there again, the ones with white eyes, closer this time. The girl knelt beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. "Don't worry, they always think they get away," she said. Then she placed something in his hand, a spoon. It was warm. He looked down into his palm and saw that it was wet with soup. But when he looked up again, the children were gone, and behind him, a new voice whispered, "Swallow, and we'll give you your voice back." Nam stared at the spoon in his hand. Warm, wet, heavy. The broth shimmered with something more than heat. Tiny shapes floated just beneath the surface, like petals or teeth. His mind refused to name them, but his hand trembled. The voice returned from somewhere above, below, inside. "Swallow, One taste, and we'll return your name." Nam dropped the spoon. It struck the ground without sound, not even a clink, just a dull pressure in the air, like it was absorbed by the earth itself. He stood, slowly. His body obeyed now, not because he was free, but because they wanted him mobile. He could feel it. Every step, every blink, he was being guided, not forced, enticed. The village was too quiet again, not the silence of sleep, the silence of holding breath. Nam walked past houses that had once been full of life. Now, behind every curtain, shadows. Behind every door, something watching. He knew it, because now he could hear them. Not with ears, with skin. Every glance brushed against him like wind. Every house knew him, as if the entire village had been rewoven into the feast itself, and he was already part of the ritual. He made his way to the far end of Tả Phìn, where the stone terrace overlooked the valley, where the sky met mountains in sweeping folds of green and gray. But tonight, there was no sky, only mist, a churning, breathing fog that rolled over the cliffs like waves crashing upward. Nam stepped to the edge. He remembered standing here as a child, his mother's hand in his, her voice whispering stories about the spirits who danced in the clouds, stories that used to scare him. He missed being scared. That kind of fear was safe. Now he couldn't even feel his own fear anymore. He was too empty. Behind him, footsteps, soft, measured. He turned and saw his mother. She was exactly as she'd been the day she died. The same dress, the same smile, the same sadness in her eyes. "Nam," she said gently. He blinked. He could hear her. "Mom," he whispered, and the voice worked. The sound came back, rough, faint, but real. His voice, his name. She reached for him. "Come home. They only want what was promised." Nam took a step forward. I didn't promise anything." Her expression didn't change. "Yes, you did. The moment you remembered." She opened her palm. A chopstick lay across it. Not black, not red, but white. Bone. Nam stepped back, but she was closer now. "They chose you because you came back, because you're the first one to look at the table and not look away." Nam clutched his stomach. Something inside was turning, twisting. Hunger, not for food, for belonging. The forest, the silence, the table. It was calling to him like a forgotten name. And worst of all, it felt like home. His mother smiled. "Sit one last time, Nam. One bite, then peace." He looked down at the mist curling around his legs. It smelled like incense and soup and firewood from winters long gone. It smelled like childhood and funerals. Nam closed his eyes. He took a breath, and in the breath, he whispered, "No." He opened his eyes. She was gone. The chopstick had turned to ash, and the mist recoiled. But only for a second. Then it surged forward, this time with teeth. The mist lunged, not like fog, like water, like a mouth. Nam ran, The terraces vanished beneath his feet as he fled into the forest, but the landscape had changed. There were no paths anymore, no direction, only trees that shifted positions when he wasn't looking, closing in behind him, rerouting him like veins guiding blood back to the heart. And the feast, it wasn't behind him, it was beside him. He could hear it, plates clinking, soup sloshing, chopsticks tapping porcelain, every footstep matched by the echo of a spoon scraping bone. Nam pushed harder. Branches clawed at his arms, drawing blood, but the pain helped him remember something important. He was still alive, or at least not fully consumed. Not yet. He had said no. He had broken the invitation, and that meant there was still time. The trees suddenly parted, a clearing, a shrine. Not new, not forgotten. Somewhere in between. A simple stone structure, crumbling at the corners, draped in mold and red thread, its roof bowed under centuries of memory. At its base, an altar. Burned out incense, rotten fruit, wax puddles from candles long dead, and something else, a book. Nam stumbled forward breathless and opened it. The pages were thin rice paper, brittle to the touch. Inside, names, thousands of names, written in dozens of hands, in dozens of styles, some shaky, some etched deep, some smudged by time and tears. At the end of the list, the last name, Lee, and beneath it, Nam. His hand, his ink, his name. He didn't remember writing it, but the paper remembered. A new voice rose from behind the shrine, calm, deep, gentle. You accepted the invitation when you returned. Nam turned slowly. A man stood there, or something that wore the shape of a man. Tall, robed, skin the color of wet clay, his face constantly shifting, blurring between youth and age, familiarity and stranger. Nam stepped back. What are you? The figure smiled with no mouth. I am the one who clears the plates. Nam clenched his fists. Why me? You remembered, the figure said simply, and remembering is a form of eating. Every memory is a bite. Every word is seasoning. And now you are full. Nam shook his head. I never sat at the table. The figure's eyes sharpened. But you dreamed of it. You followed it. You whispered its name. The forest pulsed. Nam dropped the book. The ground beneath the shrine began to split, wide, slow cracks opening like a yawning mouth. From below, mist poured out, carrying with it laughter, familiar, childlike, cruel. Nam turned to run, but the trees had moved again, and this time they were holding chopsticks. Dozens of thin, black branches reached out toward him, tapping together like teeth. He turned back to the shrine, desperate, and saw one last thing, a mirror, cracked, dirty. He wiped it with his sleeve and saw his own face, but he wasn't blinking, wasn't breathing. He was smiling. The reflection raised its hand and held up a bowl. In it, floating on a bed of rice, a new name, not his, but someone else's. A name he didn't know yet, because his seat had already been taken. Nam didn't know how he got back. One moment the forest was swallowing him whole, branches like hands, the fog like breath, the earth tilting like a gaping throat. The next, He was inside the house, his grandmother's house. The door was closed, the incense was fresh, the room was clean, too clean. Not a speck of dust, not a mark on the floor. The broken ceramic bowl from earlier? Gone. The red string around the window? Never tied. And sitting across the room, his grandmother, kneeling by the altar, praying. Her lips moved, her eyes were closed, her hands trembled. Nam took a step forward, throat dry. "Ba?" She didn't respond. He tried again, louder. "Ba!" Her eyes opened, and for the first time, she looked through him, not at him, not startled, just distant, quiet, resigned. "You've already eaten," she whispered. Nam's stomach twisted. He opened his mouth, but the words caught like bone in his throat. "I didn't. I never—" "You did not sit down." She turned to face the altar. "But you swallowed the stories. You opened the door. You let them remember their names." The incense flared. Nam stepped back. Something moved behind him. The sound of wood, a creak. He turned. A table had appeared in the center of the room. Not the altar table, not the dining table. The feast table. Smaller than before, but unmistakably alive. Its surface was dark, gleaming like oil, and the legs bent inward like something crouched, waiting to rise. Steam wafted from a single bowl in the center. Nam stared at it. The scent filled the room, familiar, warm, and horrifying. Rice, pork, tea, his meal. But it wasn't cooked. It was raw, wet, bleeding slightly at the edge. Nam stumbled back, bile rising, but he couldn't stop looking. Inside the bowl, a photograph. His face, mouth open, eyes shut, skin pale. A pair of black chopsticks lay across it, forming an X. His grandmother spoke again, softly. "Once the name is written, the table finds you. Once the first bite is taken, the rest comes home." Nam shook his head, whispering, "I didn't eat! I didn't eat!" But memory whispered otherwise. The broth, the spoon, the mist, the dream. Had he swallowed? Even once? Even a drop? And if he had, wasn't that enough? The lights in the room dimmed, not turned off, absorbed, like the walls had grown hungry too. Nam backed into the corner, gripping the wall behind him. The table moved, just an inch, toward him. He blinked. The bowl was closer now. Another inch, another breath. A whisper bloomed behind his ear. "It's rude to let the food go cold." Nam screamed, but no sound came out. His voice, once returned, was gone again, and this time it did not feel borrowed. It felt given away. From the far corner of the room, the figure of Lee emerged, face blank, eyes hollow, hands carrying a second bowl. He placed it beside the first. Inside, another photograph. Nam, again, but different, older, sadder, eyes open, looking directly at the camera, as if he knew. And on the back of the photograph, scrawled in red ink, "Seat taken." The table creaked again, and this time, Nam didn't step back. The room was still. No wind, No breath, just the soft, aching sound of wood settling, like a living thing adjusting its posture. Nam stood before the table. 2 bowls sat in front of him, both bearing his face. One younger, caught in frozen fear. One older, hollow-eyed and resigned. Both submerged in broth that shimmered with oil and shadow. And across from him, Lee, still silent, still smiling. Nam stared at him. "Why me?" he mouthed, though no sound left his throat. Lee tilted his head, as if considering, then lifted one hand and pointed behind Nam. Nam turned slowly and saw himself sitting at the head of the table. But it wasn't a reflection. It was real, a duplicate, a shell, a version of Nam that looked just like him, but calmer, cleaner, eyes dull, hands folded neatly, back straight, and smiling. The table creaked again. Nam looked down. A 3rd bowl had appeared. This one was empty, but in front of it, laid carefully on a folded red cloth, a single white chopstick. Not black, not red, not bone. White wood, clean, fresh, new. The seat at the head of the table slowly scraped back, inviting. The duplicate Nam tilted his head slightly, still smiling, and then spoke. "You remembered us." Nam's heart thundered. "You called our names. You sat at our story. You chewed our fear. And now," he leaned forward, "you feed what you awakened." Nam shook his head, stepping back. But there was no back. The walls were gone. The floor had become soil. The house had folded outwards, unfurling into the forest, and surrounding the table. They were all there. The guests, dozens of them, all the forgotten ones, women in wedding dresses soaked in rot, children with mouths sewn shut, men with smiles carved too wide, old spirits with blackened hands and red thread through their throats, and in the back, Nam's mother. Her eyes were full of tears. Her voice was silent. She shook her head slowly. But it was too late. Because now, Nam remembered. He had eaten. Not here, not now, but once. A dream. A sip. The broth had tasted like his name, and he had swallowed. Even a drop was enough. The version of Nam at the head of the table smiled wider now. He said, "You know the rule. No one eats for the spirit." He held out the white chopstick. Nam took it. His hands moved on their own. He sat down. The chair welcomed him like a parent who had waited too long. The bowl filled with rice. Steam rose. Soft. Familiar. Final. Nam looked up. Every face around the table turned toward him. Silent. Expectant. And in unison, without opening their mouths, they whispered, "Eat, and the silence will be yours forever." Nam sat still. The bowl in front of him steamed softly. White rice, too perfect. No grains out of place. No scent of spice or salt. Only warmth, like breath, like skin, like something once alive. In his hand, the white chopstick. It trembled slightly, not from his hand, but on its own. Around the table, the spirits leaned forward. None of them ate, not until he did. Nam's mouth was dry. His throat burned, not with thirst, but with absence. He couldn't remember the last word he'd spoken. Not just that night, not just in the forest, at all. His voice was gone. Not stolen, not hidden, given. And now something else waited to take its place. Across the table, his double, the other Nam, leaned closer, eyes blank, smile soft. "It's not the food that feeds us," he said. "It's the silence that follows." He reached toward Nam's bowl and gently pressed his hand against it. Nam didn't resist. The bowl rose an inch, tilted slightly forward, and in it rice began to move. Not physically, emotionally. He felt the rice, like memory. He saw flashes, his mother lighting incense, the first funeral he ever attended, a cold morning in the city, watching someone buried with no name, and then a spoon, a sip, a voice in the mist whispering, "Just a taste." Nam opened his mouth. He didn't want to, but it wasn't hunger that guided him. It was recognition. The rice touched his tongue, warm, and suddenly he was outside his body, watching himself eat. The room had no walls now, only trees bent inward like ribs, only sky heavy with silence, only the table stretching longer and longer, folding through the forest like a spine, and seated along it, more versions of him. Nam as a child, Nam as a teenager, Nam as a middle-aged man, Nam as something else entirely. Each of them eating silently, eyes empty, chopsticks raised. Nam screamed, but not out loud. The sound came from the Nam at the table, the one still seated. And when it emerged, it wasn't his voice. It was Lee's, rough, hollow, borrowed. "Thank you for your silence," it said. Nam, the real Nam, tried to run, but there was no ground, only shadows shaped like rooms, houses, memories, all filled with mouths chewing in perfect, polite quiet. 1,000 feasts, 1,000 spirits, 1,000 people who once remembered and now had been consumed. Nam turned, desperate, and found his grandmother standing behind him, not spectral, not twisted, just tired, old, worn. She looked at him with sad eyes and said, "Chao Ah, you stayed too long." She placed a bowl in his hands, and in it, his name, written in black ink, still wet, slowly dissolving into the broth. Nam stood in the clearing, but he couldn't remember how he got there. His feet were bare, his hands were cold. The bowl in his palms was warm, too warm. He looked down. The rice inside had vanished. Now there was only broth, dark, reflective, and floating on the surface, a single letter. The first letter of his name. Just one. The rest had already dissolved. He blinked. What was his name? No, he knew it. Didn't he? He searched for it in his mouth, on the back of his tongue, in the corners of his mind. It wasn't there. He looked up. The trees stared back, not with eyes, but with recognition. They bent toward him, as if nodding in agreement. Yes, you've been here before. Yes, you are staying now. Yes, you are what's next. He stumbled forward, clutching the bowl to his chest like it was the last piece of himself. The forest didn't fight him. It guided him. The mist curled into shapes as he walked, faces he almost remembered. A friend, a classmate, a voice that once called his name from a window. They passed through him, didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't know him anymore. At the edge of the path, he saw a boy kneeling beside a fallen log, digging. Small hands, dirty nails, a quiet hum in his throat. Nam approached. The boy looked up. His eyes were pale, white but not blind, and in his hand, a chopstick. Nam flinched, but the boy smiled. "I found yours." He held it out. Nam stared. It was black, glossy, smooth, and at the tip, scratched into the wood, was the full version of his name, the part he couldn't remember. The boy placed it gently in Nam's bowl, and the broth stopped rippling. From behind him, he heard footsteps, measured, familiar. He turned. Lee stood there. But he wasn't blank anymore. He was aware. His voice worked now. "You understand, don't you?" he said. Nam tried to speak, but nothing came out. Lee stepped closer. "It's not about death. It's not even about the table." He pointed to Nam's chest, where the bowl was pressed close. "It's about forgetting. The more you resist, the more it takes. Not your life, your memory of having ever existed." Nam's knees buckled. He dropped to the ground. The trees moved closer. A red thread began to weave itself between the trunks, like a web, like a boundary, like the mouth of something preparing to close. Nam lifted the bowl, stared at the liquid. His name was fading again, the ink bleeding into the broth like grief dissolving into years. He raised the chopstick, just one, and just as he was about to stir it, a voice behind him whispered, "There's still a seat open. You can choose not to fill it." He turned. His mother stood at the edge of the clearing, wearing the same clothes from the day she died, but her voice was strong now. "I lit a candle for you, in the city, every year." Nam's eyes burned. Tears maybe, or just memory struggling to stay alive. "You were never forgotten," she whispered. "Not by me." She reached out her hand. Nam looked at the bowl, at the chopstick, then at her. And suddenly, he remembered something. Not a moment, not a word, but a feeling. Love, warm, loud, alive. And in that moment, he dropped the bowl. It shattered against the earth. The broth hissed, and the fog around him screamed. The fog shrieked, not like wind, not like storm, but like memory being torn in half. Nam dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't in the air, it was in his blood. In the trees, red threads snapped like sinew. The forest shuddered, the web unraveling. Nam's breath came back, sharp, real. The silence inside him was breaking. He screamed for real, a raw, ragged cry pulled from the very bottom of his being. And the forest heard it. Across the clearing, the spirits stumbled. Their mouths moved, confused, some crying, some angry, some simply vanishing like smoke with no air left to breathe. The table trembled, dishes shattered, bowls boiled. One by one, the guests of the feast collapsed into ash. Except one, Nam's double. He remained seated, unmoved, but his face was changing. Skin cracking, smile twitching, his eyes, black marbles, rolled in their sockets as if trying to stay focused. And then he spoke. "You gave us your name." Nam stood. "No," he growled, "I remembered it." The double grinned. "But names don't belong to the living." He stood too, and the forest leaned in. Lee appeared behind Nam, real, breathing, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. Nam turned. "For what?" Lee looked at the bowl still cracked on the ground. "You broke the chain, but it needs someone. If no one takes the seat," his eyes filled with grief, "then it takes the one who invited the feast back." Nam stared at him. "What do you mean?" Lee raised a hand, trembling. "I told you. I spoke once too. I remembered them. I called their name." He stepped forward. "They took my voice, so I wouldn't call them again." And then, gently, he placed something into Nam's hand. A new chopstick. But this one was neither black nor white. It was red, old, familiar. Nam looked up at Lee. "No," he whispered. "There must be another way." "There isn't," Lee said. The double, Nam's reflection, began to sink into the ground, slowly folding into the earth like a rotten root finally pulled free. The seat at the table remained empty, waiting. Lee stepped toward it. Nam grabbed his arm. "You don't have to." Lee smiled, soft and small. "Someone always does." He sat. The chair groaned. The table sighed. The forest exhaled. And for the first time, there was no hunger, no whisper, no steam, just quiet, true quiet. Lee lifted his bowl. Inside, nothing. He set it back down, untouched. And with that, the table slowly began to crack, not violently, but peacefully, like wood returning to soil, like the story was full, finished, fed. Nam turned away, eyes burning. His mother was still at the edge of the clearing. She nodded. "You broke the feast, Khan." He walked toward her, one step at a time, every footfall lighter, every breath stronger. Behind him, the red threads dissolved, the mist lifted, the forest exhaled again, and the altar of names in the distance burned itself to ash. Nam reached his mother's hand, warm, human, and whispered, "I remember now."
Tả Phìn was quiet again. The fog had lifted. The red threads were gone. The forest no longer whispered. Nam stood at the edge of the village, the morning sun pale but warm on his face. For the first time in what felt like years, he could hear birds. No footsteps behind him, no bowls at the door, no chopsticks in the soil. Just breath, just silence. The good kind. Beside him, his mother smiled. Not a spirit, not a vision, but a piece of memory that had survived. She wasn't really there, but she didn't need to be. Nam had remembered her. That was enough. He walked through the village. People returned to their homes. Doors opened. Incense burned for the living again. Lee's name was added to the altar. Not in black, not in ash, but in gold leaf. Nam placed a flower beneath it. He didn't cry. He didn't whisper. He simply bowed his head. And the wind moved softly through the trees. Weeks passed. Nam packed his things. He would return to the city, to his work, to the world, but he would never be the same. He had seen a place between breath and bone, between word and forgetting, a place built of names, and he knew now silence could be holy, but it could also hunger. As he boarded the bus that wound down the mountain road, he looked back one last time. The forest waved gently in the wind. At its edge was a table, just barely visible in the trees. No chairs, no food, not yet. But it was there, waiting. Because the silent feast never ends. It simply sleeps until someone remembers it again. Until someone says the wrong name. Until someone whispers, "I don't believe." Then the table appears, and the chopsticks rise, and another seat is set. The final line? If you hear a voice at the feast, it's not yours anymore.